Welcome to Conversations for a Cause. Emerging leaders, no room for hate. Thank you all for joining us for this first conversation. When we look closely at almost any urban city, one important fact launches out. Enclaves of people live in relatively isolated communities distinguished by racial and ethnic identity. Today, we'll begin a journey, one different than we've done before. And we'll begin with a welcome from Bakari Henderson with the Bakari Foundation. Phil?
Hello, welcome to our first Conversation for a Cause. I'm Phil Henderson, Bakari's father, co-founder and vice president of the Bakari Foundation. I want to thank you for joining us and look forward to an engaging conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Again, these are extraordinary times. And as we begin to embark upon this journey and think about the state of civil unrest in our nation, one thing is for sure, it's time to do something different. And when we think about the impact of emerging leaders, the state of our nation, and the importance of developing our future and this next generation of leaders, and the reason for the Bakari Foundation in this initial conversation, we began with a video that's impactful.
An argument over a selfie may have led to the death of a 22-year-old American in Greece.
A coroner telling ABC News 22-year-old Bakari Henderson died after suffering severe head injuries during a bar fight on a Greek isle.
He had just graduated from the University of Arizona and was in Greece for a photo shoot.
Bakari Henderson attended Anderson High School and was abroad trying to make his dreams come true. The Night Beat's Brandon Jones joins us live outside Anderson High. And Brandon, there are still so many questions about what happened here.
Believe it or not, I actually saw it on the news about 5 o'clock. Saw the name, I saw the face. Got it, no way. Just can't be real. Just can't be real.
That night we went to bed and, you know, everything seemed to be fine. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, we got a call from the embassy that he had been murdered.
We kept asking the embassy, are you sure it's Bakari? Are you sure? Are you sure? We thought the call was maybe he lost a wallet. Maybe, you know, they found something. And it was just, you know, we couldn't believe it.
Devastating. Bakari was an adventurous young man. He loved life. He was not shy. He was very outgoing. He also liked to travel. He liked to play games like chess. He enjoyed all types of sports.
He just had that free spirit, you know, and he had the gift of gab, and he had the big smile. He was already on the right trajectory, you know, in conversations we had. He had big goals.
He wanted to pursue the business he started, which was a clothing line. He had pretty much laid a floor plan of what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. So we supported him, and you know, and that's why he was off to Greece once he graduated to pursue that.
He just had this drive. Like there's just certain people, like it's just not going to be. There's no roadblock there's no wall he can't climb. There's nothing going to get in his way. Like it's when he set his mind that he was going to do it. That young man was going to do it, period. I've never seen anybody believe in themselves as much as that young man, and that's to this day.
Bakari worked at the Y just like his other brother, PJ, and also his sister, Jory, who still works there now at the daycare. And PJ was a lifeguard, and Bakari was a lifeguard. And growing up, I was a part of the Y, and the kids loved the Y. We used to take them to the Y, and as soon as they got old enough to get a job at the Y, they wanted to work at the Y.
He was the epitome of what we want all young staff people to be. If a member had a complaint, Bakari would talk to him, and before you know it, the member would maybe come to me and say, I really like that young man. I almost forgot what I was complaining about, which is pretty funny.
He could speak, talk to anyone, and everyone he ran into, he considered a friend. He didn't have enemies.
My hope is this award is an award that will outlive us all. Maybe my daughter, who's 5 years old, will have an opportunity to be there when it's given out in years to come.
It's very heartwarming to know that they thought enough of Bakari to do this, and so it's a way to continue to honor his legacy, and we're sure he would be proud as well. And so we look forward to meeting all the new emerging leaders that are up and coming.
We will not allow Bakari's name to be forgotten within these walls, within this community, within the entire Y family.
We always say, what, dream big?
Yeah, we always say dream big.
Dream big, dream big. Nothing was too high. You set your goals, you could achieve it. Mm-hmm. He believed in that, dream big.
To honor Bakari's legacy as an outstanding young leader in our Y community, we have created the Bakari Henderson Emerging Leader Award to celebrate his life of service to others.
An argument over a self.
Let's learn a little bit more about the Bakari Foundation. Next, we'll have Jill Henderson, the founder and president, Bakari's mother, and board director for the Bakari Foundation, to tell us a little bit more about this great work that they're doing. Jill?
Hello, everyone. So a week before Bakari's murder, he actually prayed on our family line, which is a weekly prayer line that we have, and he prayed for world peace and for President Trump to make this world a better place and not a worse place. So once he was murdered, we were trying to think of ways to continue his legacy and decided to continue his legacy of love. And therefore we founded the Bakari Foundation, which provides transformative travel experiences for for families who've lost loved ones at the hands of another. These are retreats for families so that they're able to come together and heal and start a new normal together, and to provide them with therapeutic services that they may not normally receive. We also will be launching a civics program and an entrepreneur program to continue with his love for learning as well. We named this series Dream, Love, Lead because Bakari was a big dreamer, Bakari loved people, and Bakari was a natural born leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you for inspiring us to dream. Thank you for inspiring us to love. Thank you for inspiring us to lead. And Bakari's legacy will live on. And when we think about that, we think about community. Did you know that 59.6% of hate crimes are motivated by race, ethnicity, or ancestry bias? Experts estimate an average of 250,000 hate crimes are committed each year between 2004 and 2015 in the United States. And that was before civil unrest in the state that we're in right now. And the majority of these crimes are not reported. And this data comes from FBI data and the US Department of Justice. And if you could see on the screen the definition of a hate crime, and while we know bias is not a crime itself, but when it results in hate, it is. And you can see the incidents from 2018, incident that has been motivated by bias. And so it is our belief that striving toward community should be a high value for all of us. And if this is true, then what do we need to do to work together? Especially when we think about Bakari so many other families who have lost their loved ones at the hands of another. And more importantly, how do we continue to train up our children, develop better leaders, and create a more peaceful world? And so this sets the stage for this conversation for a cause. And I will begin by introducing our panel. And so we're very excited for the leaders who have joined us from all walks of life to say, you know what, world, we're better than this. We can do so much better. This panel comes from all walks of life, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different cultural groups, even different political ideologies. But you know what? It isn't about that. When we think about the common good, we think about the best in us and what makes us truly the individuals that we know we are in this great country that we live in. I will begin by introducing our panels, and I will ask each panel to introduce themselves, and then they will share with our viewing audience what's your why. I'll start with Mr. Albert Hawkins, our public policy consultant. Albert.
Thank you, Carmen, and good evening. It's a privilege for me to join with you this afternoon, and I think these are very relevant and appropriate topics that we'll engage in discussion with. I've been involved with and around government for more than 35 years. I had a career in government at both the state and the federal level for more than 30 years. And I was fortunate to have the opportunity and privilege to serve in a number of capacities. And in those roles, I did come to know a little bit about how government works, what its purposes are or should be, and how to meet the requirements that the citizens of the state and the country expect. After retiring in 2009, I launched a second career as a public policy consultant. And in that capacity, I support and assist private companies to collaborate with governmental agencies to deliver services and meet required goals and expectations, and really to be successful in helping the agency meet the objectives and expectations that have been set for them. When I think about the question of why I would be a part of this panel, it really gets back to basic support for the principles and mission of the Bakari Foundation. Of course, Bakari was an incredible young man and a model, I think, for a lot of our younger citizens to exemplify. And I think the conversations that are taking place and the other activities of the foundation are very pertinent to how we as a society should behave, how we should align ourselves for civil society, and the kinds of activities and behavior we need to model for the rest of the world. So I'm very pleased and honored to be a part of this panel discussion.
Thank you, Albert. We're pleased and honored to have you. Our next panelist is Mr. Charlie Brown. Charlie?
Hello, everybody. So I met Bakari when he was about 10 years old. He and my oldest son were friends, and I coached him in Little League Baseball. And then later on, when he was in college, he worked as an intern for my company. And he was a very special young man. And my wife and I had the opportunity to go over to Greece for the trial of the criminal trial of the people who murdered him. And we sat in on a few days of evidence. And, you know, this was it was a hate crime. And his death was a result of a hate crime after hearing the evidence in that case. And, you know, I wanted to be involved in the Bakari Foundation because I just don't think we should move on and not honor his legacy. He was a special person. He would have done great things had he been given the opportunity to do that. And I think that I wanted to be involved in the foundation because I think, you know, we just need to do better in this world. And to the extent that we can do something through the foundation to honor his legacy and to improve the world as we know it, then I'm very excited to be involved.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. And thank you for your commitment to the Bakari Foundation. Bailey Gibson. Next, we'll have Bailey Gibson.
Hi there. Yes, my name is Bailey, and I am a former student at the University of Arizona College of Management. So I went to business school with Bakari. He got much better grades than I did, but I got to know him very well in that environment, and he was such an inspiration for me. In my career, I
having some technical difficulties.
Is that better?
Yes, 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 yes.
No, it's gonna work, huh?
Yes.
Well, hi again. I am Bailey Gibson. I would call myself a student, a daughter, a writer, and I'm the founder of Art of Mending blog. I attended the University of Arizona with Bakari at the Eller College of Management. He got much better grades than I did, but we had a lot of fun and we got to know each other really well. Following graduation, I saw a purpose, more purpose in my life, and wanted to make a greater impact on my community. I think in a way, Bakari really rubbed off on me in that sense. I decided to pursue a relationship with God, and I found a passion for writing and discovered my love for helping others. So through an internet platform, I tried to share stories of my courage and my strength from God. And I think that my why, or I know that my why, is to glorify God. And I know from personal experience how that has changed my heart and has helped me understand that as a whole body of Christ, when one of us hurts, all of us hurt. And it has just changed my life. So that is why I'm so excited and so honored to be here.
Thank you, Bailey. We're honored to have you as well. Armin?
Hi, everyone. I am actually a graduate of Anderson High School, where I first met PJ Henderson. And from there, I spent probably, a few hours every week at the Henderson household, and some of the best times of my life. Just an amazing, amazing family. And everybody here can attest to that. And Bakari was a perfect example of that. Since then, I've become an attorney and a high school teacher. And part of what I do as a teacher is to create students who are willing to learn, who are willing to listen, and who can speak like Bakari. The ultimate goal, the success story, is to have young men like Bakari Henderson. And I'm so excited to work with the Henderson family on their new program over at Gus Garcia Middle School. The initiative that they're starting is going to do some wonderful things for some students that really deserve it. And I think it's a mission that Bakari would truly believe in. And beyond that, I'm a fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School in the Center for Public Leadership. And my why is East Austin. I think we have a community that is underserved and is incredibly talented. And if we put the proper resources there, like what the Hendersons are doing with Gus Garcia, we will have a community full of Bakari Hendersons, and that's exactly what we need. We need those talented young men to shine, young women as well. And I'm very excited to be a part of this program and to be a part of the Henderson Initiative in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Armin. And last but certainly not least, Judge Aurora Martinez-Jones. Judge?
Hi, I'm Aurora Martinez-Jones. Thank you for having me. was invited to join this panel. I am a first-generation American, and I am a judge, and I'm the first in my family to have a professional position. I've been in the Austin community since 2001, and my position on the bench is working with children and family, particularly children and families who need to heal. I preside over the child welfare dockets, and I work with kids in foster care. And my why is really hope. I work with our community and some of the most vulnerable people in our community in some of the worst of their times. But I've seen how people can heal, and I've seen what amazing potential everybody has, especially our young people who come from really hard places. And so I'm very excited to be here. I have heard about Bakari, and very, very sad when I learned he was from our community when it happened. But seeing the foundation, and especially when I was invited here to talk about this specific topic, brought me back to that hope and that why. Because if we are able to have these conversations as much and as often as possible, I think really amazing things can happen. And I've seen amazing things happen with the people in our community.
Thank you, Judge. We appreciate that. And so you have been introduced to some amazing leaders, some absolutely amazing leaders on this panel. And so as we begin this discussion, this conversation about where do we go from here, what does it mean to be an amazing leader? And how do we begin to do something different than what we see in the world? We'll start with a poll. And that question is, how confident are you that schools are adequately preparing the next generation of students to successfully lead in today's multicultural society? And so for our viewing participants, if you would just participate in the poll. Are you extremely confident, confident, you're neutral, somewhat confident, or not confident at all? How confident are you that schools are adequately preparing the next generation of students to successfully lead in today's multicultural society? I would ask you to participate in this poll question right now. You see the results on the screen. 0% that are extremely confident. 13% confident. 9% neutral. 31% somewhat confident. And overwhelmingly, 47% are not confident at all. So we have work to do. We have work to do as parents. We have work to do as professionals. We have work to do as leaders. We have work to do as a community. And we have work to do as citizens of the United States. We have work to do. And so as we begin this conversation, we'll begin to explore, what does that mean? Now we'll start with our panel conversation. And if I could ask our panelists our opening question. And that opening question is, suppose you had an opportunity to speak to the world about the current state of social unrest, what would you say? Charlie, I'll begin with you. What would you say, Charlie?
Well, I think that it's long overdue, the recognition of the systemic racism in our country. And the other thing I would say is that we shouldn't lose focus on it just because it's something that's been around for forever. And the fact that it's been brought to our attention more so in recent months, I hope we don't lose focus on it. Like we in this country tend to lose focus when we have a crisis one day or 1 week, then everybody gets wound up and excited about it, and then they lose focus and move on to another issue. And like gun control or whatever it may be. And I hope that we will continue to stay focused on the issues that have been brought up recently, and not as time goes on, not get unfocused and focus on something else.
Armin, if I can take over from there. I agree completely. And I think right now we're in a moment that we need to take advantage of. There's some positive momentum going toward supporting social equality, justice, right? In Austin, Texas, we are seen as a liberal city, but you can grow up in Austin, go to a middle school named after a Confederate general, go to a high school with the mascot of the rebels, go to a college where you are going to pass statues of Confederate leaders and people who said that African Americans don't deserve to be on the same campus as white Americans. And it's going to be tough to challenge some of these things that we have seen as normal for the past many decades. And it's going to be tough to kind of overcome those challenges. But I would say to everybody, it's going to be tough for a while, but it needs to be tough to get better.
Thank you, Armin. Albert, would you like to chime in on that one?
I would. First, I want to keep it in context. The social unrest, and if you look at the history of the country, the history of the world, major changes have always been initiated through social unrest. And so I think it's a clear demonstration of the broad dissatisfaction with certain aspects of our country, our society, our cultures. And so that needs to lead to the change. And of course, constructive activity in response to it is what's needed. And it needs to be on all levels of activity, not just socially, but legislative and judicial and governmental. And so we need to make sure that we harness the energy that's being reflected now and direct that into positive, constructive change.
Thank you. Thank you, Albert. Bailey, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would definitely acknowledge, that we have an issue with racism, not just domestically, but internationally. Obviously, we're all sitting here right now. But I would also take the opportunity to, share what's changed my life in the sense of the gospel and what I've seen so many others, their lives changed. I think that understanding that kind of love, that kind of godly love, makes us capable of loving as well. And when you truly are able to love your neighbors, regardless of what ethnicity and what, race or any kind of difference that they have, it really changes your mindset. And again, I'm speaking from personal experience of having those differences and at one point being very offsetting to others, and having that change of heart now and having a completely different viewpoint of the world now.
Thank you for that. Judge, your thoughts?
Well, I would say that there is room for everybody in the movement to equity in all systems and in our society. There's so much work to be done, but I think with people focusing their effort in the place that they are most effective, that the work can be done together. It's always going to take collaboration and working together and understanding the effort that it's going to take. It's not one person alone, but it's us collectively moving forward to a more equitable way of life in our country.
Thank you for that. And with that, what impact do you believe this will have on the way we develop emerging leaders in the future? What impact will this have on the way we mentor and develop emerging leaders going forward? When we think about, everybody has a protest, and there's different spaces along this continuum that we can all engage. And as a judge just shared, it's going to take a collective effort. But when we think about working together and this collective effort, panelists, this is the second question. What impact do you think was happening now on the world stage and in our nation today and in our neighborhoods and in our communities? What impact is that going to have on the way that we develop and mentor future leaders?
So I'll share a thought with you. I think it'll be a substantial and positive impact. And each generation, you know, is a product of their environment. And there's been, you know, in the past, a lot of talk about the greatest generation, for instance, and what they experienced during their lifetimes. And it was World War II, or even the Depression, and looking at growing up in those times and how that influenced their development throughout their lives. I myself, is a product of the times of the Civil Rights Movement. And that certainly has influenced the way I see the world and the way I think about the way that influenced their development throughout their lives. I myself, is a product of the times of the Civil Rights Movement. And that certainly has influenced the way I see the world and the way I think about the way things that influenced their development throughout their lives. I myself, is a product of the times of the Civil Rights Movement. And that certainly has influenced the way I see the world and the way I think about those things that influenced their development throughout their lives. I myself, is a product of the times of the Civil Rights Movement. And that certainly has influenced the way I see the world and the way I think about those things that influenced their development throughout their lives. I myself, is a product of the times of the Civil Rights Movement. And that certainly has influenced the way I see the world and the way I think about those things that influenced their development throughout their lives. I myself, is a product of the times of the Civil Rights Movement. And that certainly has influenced the way I see the world and the way I think about those things that influence.
Okay, was it just me, or I think I heard an echo? And Albert, I tell you what, I definitely understand the impact and how it has influenced you through the Civil Rights Movement. And I know that the Civil Rights Movement has had a tremendous impact. And some say that we're in the new Civil Rights Movement. You know, this is more than just a moment. We want to make sure that this was absolutely a movement. And so when we think about that, and we think about how do we do this thing differently, and how do we begin at the early ages of our young people, I'd ask some of our other panelists to also chime in. What impact do you believe what we're experiencing right now is going to have on how we start training them, even at the high school level? Because the poll said 47% of the people were not confident that our students were being trained up to even engage and be successful in a multicultural society. Armin, I'd ask you to chime in and like, what are your thoughts around that?
Sure. So I'd say this moment is actually great for engaging younger people in the political space because they are enthusiastic in a way that we probably haven't seen during my lifetime. There's a lot more engagement. And I see it in my high school students every single day, the way they engage using social media and so many of these skills that, you know, they might be even stronger at than us. But I will say that the best way to engage young people is to listen to them. I think frequently we so quickly shut down younger folks, especially when we disagree with them, because we say they don't know enough, they haven't experienced enough. But I've seen some things from high school students and even middle school students. They're willing to listen to each other. They're willing to engage. They're willing to argue. They're willing to say, I don't know. maybe more so than even, folks of my generation. And, I had a conversation earlier this year at actually a YMCA event. We were there for a mock trial competition. And I have a group of students who are Christian, Catholic, atheist, agnostic, and everything in between. And for 3 hours, they had a Bible study. And they sat there listening to each other, asking questions. My church leaders, my youth leaders, they were trying to answer, and they were willing to say, I don't know. So I think young people sometimes are even better equipped than us to lead because they're willing to listen to each other. They haven't committed to a political ideology. They've simply committed to trying to understand the world.
If I can jump in, I would say I agree with Armin. Sorry, Bailey.
No, you're good.
But I would say that it's also an amazing time to help young people craft their message and help them to understand how to best elevate and speak their truth. Because I think those are the genuine, authentic messages that really get to change. And when we have young people ready to speak out and ready to move forward, I think that's the way that we can help craft them. And those are the kinds of thoughts and the conversations I'm having with the students I'm mentoring, the ones who want to be lawyers and want to be future judges. I'm really helping them craft how you don't have to be what people expect you to be. You need to be honest to yourself, speak your truth, and know that being a good person, wanting things to work out well for people and being kind along the way are all things you can be in no matter what profession you do. And so I think that being able to help young people who have so much to say and do have their own truths to speak is definitely a new way that I've been working with young people that I mentor and helping those emerging leaders. And I think that's a product of the times.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Just to bounce off you guys, I think that the impact that this is having is it's making people more proactive, especially younger generations. It's making them want to have open conversations because they do have a lot of ideas and there's a lot of learning to be done. Just within my small group of women, I have a Bible study and it went from 16 to 24 in like no time. Lots of people want to have conversations about this and talk and learn. And I think that is one good thing that can come out of a lot of bad things. And it's unfortunate that it's had to come to this, but I'm glad to see that there's one positive that we can look at.
Charlie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the young people today are far more informed just because of all the information that's accessible now through the internet, and everybody, can make their comments or have a voice. But really, I think there's a difference in that and then taking action. And I think they need to understand the difference between anybody can tweet, do whatever, excuse me, but it really comes down to being a leader is somebody that will really go out and take action. And the most important thing I think that we can teach to younger people is if you really want to have a voice, it's voting. I mean, you can talk all you want to talk, but until you get out with like-minded people and vote, the talk's cheap, but it's really going to come, it really comes down to that. And emphasizing with them that, look, because when you look at the numbers of percentage of people that get out and vote, it's really alarming. I mean, everybody wants to give you their opinion. It's a high percentage of people are tweeting or doing whatever, but a low percentage are really taking action and getting out and voting for what they believe in. And I think, we should really emphasize that with the younger people.
Yeah, I agree, Charlie. The next question is, what are characteristics of emerging leaders? And anyone can start.
I'll take that if nobody else wants it. So Charlie mentioned something, you can tweet, you can go online, but you need to take action. That action component is important as well. But what tweeting and Instagram and a lot of online work has done is that it has led a lot of our young folks to go to extremes because, the likes, the support, they all come when you say the most extreme thing on the internet. You need to be extremely woke, or you need to be extremely conservative to get the support from your community. What I think a emerging leader will do is listen. You know, I think back to times with Bakari Henderson, I think part of the reason why in that situation at the YMCA, he was able to understand those people's frustrations is because he was willing to sit there and listen. You know, even though he may have not wanted to hear what they had to say, he would have taken it in and tried to fix the problem. He wouldn't have been quick to shut them down. And I think when I see my young emerging leaders, I see folks who are willing to see both sides. Now there are limitations as well. If your response to Black Lives Matter, which means Black lives are significant, is say all lives matter, that goes beyond what I'm asking you to do. But you can still take the time to listen to other viewpoints and kind of try to understand why somebody might disagree with you. So I think that would be a big piece of what I see in an emerging leader.
I'm gonna hop in here. I just made a little note. An emerging leader to me is someone who does what needs to be done when it needs to be done, even if they're the only ones standing up for the truth. And it is just by, I guess, divine intervention that I heard the story of Esther this past Sunday. And if you haven't read it, then I'm not gonna mention it. You can go read it. But that is a great example of someone who stood up for her people when no one else was going to. And I think that that is a good example of what an emerging leader is now.
You know, I do agree with the comments that the other panelists have made. And one of the things I think that brings it all together is that it's a person who has developed a bit of credibility. It's a responsible person, one who has taken time to not just be committed, but to understand both the issues, as Armin was saying, to listen to both sides and really balance that out, to reach your own conclusions, but do it on a factual basis. And that way you do develop credibility, and then you have the position that you can influence others.
And I would add, emerging leaders, I think, are willing to not be the only person on the path that they're on. I think if they have the characteristic where they understand that they're standing on another's shoulders, and hopefully someday someone will stand on theirs, that's a really good sign of the kind of person who should be in that leadership role. So giving back and always being willing to help out, I think are some of those characteristics.
I think, and this is along that line, you know, people need to be able to get in somebody else's shoes and look at things from their perspective. And that's hard to do sometimes. And then the other one is be willing to get uncomfortable, to be out of your comfort zone. And being a leader, sometimes you have to get out of, you have to get into an uncomfortable position. And leaders are willing to do that.
You know, just one additional thought, I guess, in everything that is done, you know, you have to be trustworthy. You know, people, our leaders need to understand that their most valuable commodity is their character and the trust that people place in them, and that they need to honor that trust by doing what's right at all times.
Being willing to be uncomfortable. And so when we think about being unwilling to be willing to be uncomfortable, how have you as a leader built relationships, meaningful relationships across differences? Talk to us about that. And we know sometimes that's uncomfortable, but how have you as a leader built relationships across differences?
Well, I think it has to start with good faith on both sides, on all sides. And there has to be some acknowledgement that there is some common interest involved. And once you deal with a person human to human, and that you share a common interest in some part of it, and that you could trust each other, then you do find ways to reach out and reach across and move some things forward. But I do think it starts with trust and a willingness to focus on the things that you do have in common.
If I can hop in there, you said building trust. I think part of that is being willing to accept when you're wrong. And this is something that, I'm personally working on. So not getting defensive when somebody challenges your views, and be willing to learn from them instead of trying to prove them wrong. Not every conversation that is political or philosophical has to be a battle. Hopefully it's two people engaging in a conversation to try to come to a meaningful conclusion.
Yeah, I think that it's hard to learn to not have to be right all the time. But that's one of the ways that we get uncomfortable to build those relationships, is that we don't have to be right in every conversation, and you don't have to chime in every time. But to just love those people that you think are difficult. I read a quote that said, love difficult people, you're one of them. I think Bob Goff said that. So, just learning to love your neighbor as yourself.
Wow. That's a powerful statement, Bailey. And we say it all the time, but it's hard. It's difficult. We pray about it. Those pray about it. And again, it's easier said than done. But we have an opportunity right now to be better human beings. And so in order for us to be one with each other, we first have to start understanding what it means to be the one within us. And so when we think about that, Judge, how have you developed relationships across differences?
Well, for me, a lot of it is empathy. I have to make sure that I'm able to empathize with those people who I'm trying to build relationships with. I think the listening is also a part of that. And then there's another piece of it that's a little bit harder to do sometimes, but I try and make sure that I'm treating other people the way that I would want to be treated. And that if the response that I get when I do that is not what I expected and is, something that could be hurtful, I remember that it's not about me. That if I'm treating people the way I want to be treated and it comes back to me in a way that is harmful or hurtful, I know that it's not about me and it's something within them. And I can't change that, but I can empathize and I can listen and I can know that I did my best to treat others the way that I would want to be treated. And by doing that, I've seen that my response of not escalating to the same situation or arguing and getting into it the same way that it may be coming at me sometimes lowers people's guard. And it gives an opportunity to then start coming to some commonality and actually being able to build the relationship in a way where you can make some change together.
Thank you for that. What about our panelists want to speak to that? Charlie, Armin?
Go ahead, Armin.
I don't know if I have anything to add beyond what I said previously. Are we still asking about how we handle difficult situations or connect with people of different views?
Yes, connecting with people from different views. But what I wanted to explore with that, and that takes us into the next section, no place for hate. We started this segment, we learned about the Bakari Foundation, the tragedy that really brought us together in the first place, and why focusing on emerging leaders is critical. One of the things that you shared that I thought was very impactful is with the students that you work with and how they listen and how they harness their differences to create something beautiful and something magical. And so while adults are constantly developing, mentoring young people, what we're hearing is that we can learn a lot from young people. Middle school, high school, I think they get it. I think they absolutely get it, because what we've learned is that bias and prejudice is a learned behavior. And one of the things that we don't talk about often is based on our faith tradition in some cases, impact our values. From our values, it creates our belief system. From our belief system, we begin to become biased. From bias, we become, we start stereotyping. And from stereotypes, we begin to become prejudiced, and then we discriminate. And so when we think about that continuum, it all starts with us as the individual. And so with that, Charlie, what more can you add to that from your perspective? How have you, as a leader, as a champion for change, as someone who knew Bakari personally, who have coached him and other young leaders, what would you share that's been a strategy for you to build relationships across differences?
Well, Carmen, you know, I'm in the grouchy old white guy demographic. So from that perspective, you know, with young people, I think it goes back to listening to them. And I'm often surprised when I do listen to my kid. You know, I have 3 kids. And when I listen to them and their friends talk, I really am surprised about how well informed they are and how passionate they are about the issues that face them today. And we're leaving them with, you know, my generation is leaving them with social unrest, global warming, wealth disparity, expensive education. I mean, the list goes on of the challenges that my generation is leaving these younger people with. You know, I think it goes back to listening to them and valuing what they have to say and giving them encouragement that things can be better, that they can make things better. And that, you know, they can take action and have an impact, no matter what it is, whatever they do, volunteer somewhere, whatever, but they can, you know, things can get better and they can have a part in that. And that's really, you know, what I would encourage them to do.
Imagine a world where all were able to reach their full potential. And I just want you to just reflect on that for just a moment. Imagine a world where we could all reach our full potential. Think about what is one thing that we can do together that we cannot do by ourselves. If there was one thing that we could do together that we cannot do by ourselves, and where others could reach their full potential, what would that be? What would that be? And I ask this question because this is a part of where we're going, because it's possible. I absolutely believe it's possible. When we think about the conversations, and all of us are sat in on many, they're divisive. It's rhetoric. It's shifting blame. And so one of the things that we know for sure is that rather than talk about other individuals, how do we begin to talk with them? Okay? So how do we talk with them? How do we build community? What is that call for community? Because I believe that we have the potential to be more kind and more just. And the call to community is just that. So when we ask the question, where do we go from here? What is one thing that we can do together from all walks of life? I'm sitting here and I'm looking at your beautiful faces and the senior bios and the amazing work that you've done coming from all walks of life. What is that one thing that we can do together that we cannot do by ourselves? What is it?
I'll start us off. The one thing that I think about, which is the thing that I hope to work on, is we can't by ourselves reimagine a better, more equitable system. That takes different perspectives and the voice of the people who are impacted the most in order to be able to do that. So as much as I could want to help and can put some things into place, me, myself, as the only person, I cannot reimagine the whole system and assure that it will do better and not worse for the people who are impacted. So that's what I would say.
You know, Judge, if I could just take a deeper dive, there's been a lot of questions about systemic issues. Everyone has an opinion, perspective. Can you speak to the systemic inequity that maybe you're hearing some of the conversation? Just kind of set the record straight from your perspective.
From my perspective, and especially in the work that I do in our community, I can tell you so many systems are inequitable and are especially impacting African-American families right here in Travis County. I work in the child welfare system, and we have an overrepresentation of African-American children and parents in our system. And the thing about that is that my system is impacted by the education system. It's impacted by the criminal justice system. It's even impacted by the healthcare system, because those systems are the ones who are calling the child welfare system when there's a concern about a family or a child who may be in need. So it all is intertwined. And if I want to reimagine a better system for the children in foster care and children and families in our community, I can do a lot of work in my space, but I can't do it all by myself. There has to be those people out there working on criminal justice reform. There has to be those people out there trying to break the school to prison pipeline. There has to be those people out there trying to get more equitable health care for families of color, because all of those things impact what I'm doing. And so I could never do it all by myself. And the biggest piece of it all are the families who are being impacted. I can't make something for them without them, and their voice is important. And so that's why it has to be together.
Oh, wow, that's a very powerful statement. I'm so happy to hear you say that, because oftentimes we hear, and these are just my own words, as blaming the victim. You know, there are lots of reasons for it. I hear fatherlessness, I hear behaviors, but you know, one of the things that is important for people to understand that this issue is complex and that there is an interdependent, and one thing impacts the other. And there is enough accountability and enough blame to go around. And so when we think about, you know, the state of our nation, and let's be clear that, you know, we have a history that we have to come to terms with. And we have to be truthful about the history of America. We must be able to do that. And so as we begin to do that, we know that bias has been at the root of that. We started with Bakari and hate crime, and there's a lot going on right now. Many people, that may have been the first time they've ever heard about Bakari, but there are a lot of families who are hurting and they are in pain as a result of that. We don't hear about them. So this really isn't about divisive politics. This isn't about ideology. This isn't about, you know, whether it's just about Black Lives Matter and that movement, or it's All Lives Matter. This is about who are we as a nation, and how are we going to create a better place for our families and for our future. It depends on it, because one life impacts our entire survival. So one of the things that is very important for people to understand, that this is a very complex issue. And when we think about reimagining a world where everyone can reach their full potential, if they don't, for those of you who are out there working in corporations, you're thinking about attracting talent. You're thinking about developing that next leadership pipeline. Well, guess what? If they're going from the high school to the prison pipeline, then that means that they're not going to be productive citizens. That means that you're not going to have a workforce. There's a skill shortage out there. And so organizations now are throwing money in equity in terms of diversity and inclusion. But let's move beyond the statement. Let's look at it for what it is and understand what equity means. And that means developing emerging leaders at the K-12 level, because these are our future leaders. This is where the hope is. This is where the opportunity is. We all know that bias and hate is a learned behavior. So if we can begin to train up our children, as the Bakari Foundation is doing, and teach them how to love, and teach them how to build relationships, and help them understand their rights, how do we begin to build these relationships? Then we can begin to move forward. And so as we talk about where do we go from here, does anyone else have a thought about what is one thing we can do together that we cannot do by ourselves?
I would say that somebody was speaking. Did I interrupt? Collectively, we need to decide that we're not going to legitimize inequality by trying to explain it as people are lazy or people are somehow lesser than. I think for those of us who have the opportunity to speak out in conversations like this, we need to understand that we are where we are because of the opportunities that we have been afforded. I think a lot of the issues that come in our country are because people explain differences in how people experience America because of innate traits or what they decided to do. So I think collectively, if we want to live in a world where, you know, Judge Jones sees less disparity in terms of racial differences and who has to face the criminal justice system, who has to face the family court system, who has to deal with the CPS system, then we need to understand collectively, individually, that, you know, people's experiences with the legal system are not a matter of choice. It's a matter of, you know, circumstance. You know, what experiences were you afforded? You know, I have the opportunity to sit here today and it's not random. You know, I had the chance to grow up with the Hendersons and that's not random. You know, I had these opportunities because of the fortunes that I've had. And I think if we collectively each accept that, you know, it may hurt a little bit. You know, I'm not just a ray of sunshine, but, you know, we can have meaningful conversations so that Judge Jones' courtroom looks a little bit more equal than it does now.
Any other thoughts before we begin to come to a close of our session? Other thoughts? As we begin to continue to think about where do we go from here, we're just scratching the surface. This is just one conversation of many, but it's a conversation in the right direction. That it shows the world that you can bring people together from all walks of life and they can focus on the common good when they understand how our differences can be our strength when we connect on common ground. And so I would ask each of our panelists, of all the things that we've talked about tonight, what topic or what one thing is most important to you? What is that one thing that's very important to you?
I can go back to back if y'all want. So we saw that poll and, you know, that was disappointing, right? But it was true. You know, not many of us trust the current education system to create a just and equitable world where everybody has an opportunity to succeed, which is exactly what we don't want from what is considered to be the great equalizer, our system of education. The disparities that we see, the treatments that we see for Black students before they even have to deal with the adult criminal justice system, the disparities that we see in the treatment of different students creates a lot of the inequalities that result in family court and criminal court. So for me, the most powerful part was seeing the responses of, you know, a community of highly educated folks who have, you know, children who have probably seen a more positive side of education than even the average American. So if we spread out that poll to America as a whole, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if the results were even worse. So for us to see that from the industry that we think should be the method for giving opportunities for lower income students and underrepresented populations to succeed, then we've got a long way to go.
Any other thoughts? And while you're thinking, I had somebody text me a question and to say, please ask the panel this question. And Albert, tell us that one thing that's important to you. And as we hear from Albert and Bailey and Charlie and the judge, I will ask the question that someone has texted me and said, please, please ask your panel this question. Albert?
Well, I think the other panelists have spoken to many of the most critical issues, and they're all important to me. And certainly, you know, you can't say what ranks the highest. But one of the things that we didn't spend much time talking about is the area that I focus a lot on, and that's on health equities or inequities, if you will. And that we know that there's still, you know, great disparities in access to care, to treatment, and to the medical outcomes for persons of color or persons of low income status. And so we're beginning to move more into an area referred to as social determinants of health. and recognizing that there are a lot of factors that contribute to the health disparities. And I think that means that, as the judge was saying, you know, a broad-based involvement and engagement from all aspects of society to really go in and try to address that issue. But health equity, I think, is it's certainly one of the areas that I think is critically important.
And Albert, thank you for raising that, because we're really seeing a real exacerbation of that with COVID-19. I mean, with that, we're seeing disparities in a major way, and they've always been there, but with this pandemic, it has clearly brought it to the forefront. And so I would imagine that we will continue to feel the implications and the impact and the disparities of that for years to come. And that too is another system that definitely unequivocally has disparities. Thank you.
I'll add that the thing that really stands out to me is when you had us imagine this world where everybody's able to realize their full potential. I'm forever an optimist, and I will never stop striving for that world. I would love to get to a place where I know any child could be what they want to be when they grow up, and I would know and feel confident that there is a path for them to get there. There wouldn't be these barriers. There wouldn't be these systemic inequities that would hold them back. I think that's really key, is imagining a better world and always continuing to strive for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Charlie?
Well, I would just think we all need to stay optimistic. It's easy to get pessimistic when you look at the challenges that we have as a society. And it's great to hear from a variety of people in this panel, different backgrounds and ages and so forth. And it gives me real optimism that we can do better. And by starting conversations like this. I've learned a lot today from the other panelists.
Me too, Charlie. Thank you. Bailey?
I agree with Albert that I think that all these issues are incredibly important, and I don't think I can pick one, but one question out of this conversation that is still sticking out with me is when you asked us, how have we as a leader built meaningful relationships across differences? I am in school right now. I don't have, a high up job. I have a very small circle I interact with normally just because I have a crazy schedule, but I think about how I'm being a leader, and if I can impact 2 people and those 2 people can impact 2 people, and that grows like wildfire. So when I think about that question, it makes me focus on what I can do to be better and impact and multiply. And if that's hopefully a nugget that somebody can take away today, is how can I just impact others around me to help that grow?
Thank you. So someone texted me a question. This is please, please, please ask your panel this question. And this is a tough question. They said it's a courageous question, so I'm going to ask it. And they said, ask your panelists, what do they say to people who say Black lives has resulted in white survival? How would you respond to that? And I'm looking at this text, and they're saying there's so much divisiveness around the Black Lives Matter movement, and we believe there's some misunderstanding. But if we think about the history of this nation, we understand that Black lives has been a source of white survival. What do your panelists think about that?
Well, my first thought is that that's indisputable. I mean, we know what role enslaved Africans played in the building and history of this country. And so, I mean, that's just historical fact. And so I would hope that a person would become a little better informed or educated about it before they reached a different conclusion.
Any other thoughts?
I would say that I believe when we have, those comments and those thoughts and trying to process what that means, that a lot of the divisiveness and the fear comes from an idea that if that is true, then it must also be true to value Black lives will mean the demise of white people. And I think I would say is understanding that's not the case, and that we can value Black people without harming the value of white people, and that having a message in affirming that Black lives do matter and that Black lives have value does not diminish any others.
Wow, that's powerful. It says undisputed, and it doesn't diminish another. Armin, you say.
I think a lot of folks tend to think that the statement Black Lives Matter isn't necessary, but I think we forget how recently, Brown v. Board of Education happened. How many of these cases have just happened? Loving v. Virginia wasn't that long ago. So, I mean, we're still seeing the impact of that, where today people are still trying to explain how Black Americans and white Americans are genetically different. I sat in on a course with Dr. Cornell Brooks of the NAACP today, and we were going back on, history of the yellow fever epidemic in Philadelphia back in 1793. And we were drawing to today with COVID and how people are trying to explain that, maybe Black people are immune to COVID because they are biologically different. So it needs to be said. It's not an obvious statement. The statement that Black Lives Matter is absolutely necessary in 2020 and hopefully won't be necessary in 2030, but based on the way we're going, it will be. So I think for those that think that it is causing hostility or causing conflict, we are still trying to explain racism in 2020. We're still trying to legitimize it. So for folks to have to say Black Lives Matter, it is actually necessary at this point. Hopefully it won't be someday, but it absolutely is. Talking about Albert's comment, this country has never survived without either free labor or minimal paid labor. We never have. Still to this day, we survive off of prison labor. We survive off of migrant labor below minimum wage. And do Black lives provide for white survival? Yeah. And at this point, all of us are surviving off of, migrant labor and Black labor behind bars.
Wow, thank you. Powerful. Wow, yeah, good question. Thank you for that. Anyone else care to share? Because that was very powerful. And thank you, viewer, for texting me that question. Thank you, panelists, for answering that. That's a question that many people have had, and to be able to explain it in such a way that it is unbiased and a way that people understand is absolutely powerful. And for that, thank you for the question, for the person who texted to me, and thank all of you. With that being said, this brings us to a close. We have some acknowledgements, and there's a beautiful lady on the screen that you've probably seen the whole session that we have not forgotten, and that is Jan Richards. She is the Secretary and Board of Director of the Bakari Foundation, and she will do some acknowledgements. And some closing remarks. Jan?
Thank you, Carmen. Just to give a few closing remarks. It's really always hard to give a close. Kind of as it was said earlier, there's been so much stated that's important and impactful. We do, as the Bakari Foundation, focus on helping to heal people through and in the aftermath of tragedy. However, we found you just really can't do that in a vacuum. You can't do it effectively unless you look at the things that are around them, societal issues that have to be addressed for them to be able to thrive. And that's how we came up with developing this series. So thanks to all of you who have shared some information, whether it's our panelists with your insightful comments, many people.
Sorry, I missed that. Could you say it again, please?
many participants who also sent questions, and anyone who has thought about these types of issues. We want to hear from you as we go forward, because today was just the foundation. The organization is headquartered in Austin, Texas. However, this is not only an Austin organization. People who come to our retreats, people we support through tragedy, all of those people are around the country, throughout the United States. So everybody who needs help, we want to be able to work with them. And your ideas are going to be so helpful, each one on this meeting, in how we decide to go forward. It wasn't even always a given that this panel discussion was going to be a series. We just found that as we were planning it, there's so much more to be done. We're starting with emerging leaders, but all of our series is not going to be about younger people. It's going to be those people who may be at the top, who need to handle things in a different manner. It's going to be about people who are all ages, all backgrounds, live in all places, education, clergy, legal field, people who are trying to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. So there's a place at the table for everyone. As it's been said many times, it won't be done by any one person alone. So even though we have many ideas, be sure to email us your thoughts and ideas because they're going to come into play. You may have things that you learned about during this session. Great, we want to hear from you. Or you may have things that you wanted to try to address, but you didn't have a platform to be able to do it. Maybe this will be your platform. So we'll keep you posted on what's going to be upcoming with our next sessions. We want you to participate with us, not only during the sessions, but also in the initiatives as we're able to roll them out. And you'll get plenty of information about that. And the email address, as you see, is info@thebakarifoundation.org. Thanks so much for your attention tonight. Carmen?
Thank you, Jan. So we have a poll question. And so with that, for those of you who are still with us, how would you like to be a part of our community of support? Mentor, panelist, donor, sponsor, other, or need more information? And if you need more information, we'll show how you can stay in contact and follow the great work that the Bakari Foundation is doing. So if you would just take this poll, how would you see yourself being involved as part of this community of support? A mentor? I know I wish I had a mentor when I was younger. A future panelist? We'd love to have engagement with civic leaders because we believe in the village and collaborating. As a donor, as a sponsor, or if you just need additional information, we'll have that email address out there. That's info@thebakarifoundation.org, or you can go to the Bakari Foundation website. That's www.thebakarifoundation.org. So if you would just take a moment to participate in this poll, we'd appreciate it. And as you are participating in the poll, before we close, the Bakari Foundation is very giving. Wow, oh, that warms my heart. 38% would care to mentor. If you're still out there, if you would just put your email in the chat, we'll get in touch. The Bakari Foundation will be in contact with you. There's so much work to be done. Students need mentors all over the place. So if you wouldn't mind putting your email in the chat, there's another opportunity as well. We have a gift for those who are still with us. Or again, you can email the Bakari Foundation at info@thebakarifoundation.org. And so there's some folks that we like to acknowledge as we bring it to a close. And what you'll see on the next slide we like to thank our community, the Bakari Foundation loyal supporters and donors, the YMCA Austin, Texas, for renaming the Emerging Leaders Award after Bakari, the Center for Intentional Inclusive Community, our moderator and panelists, our technical guru, you don't see her, but a beautiful and highly intelligent leader that we love dearly, Ty Dawkins, and again, the Bakari Foundation Board of Directors. So we just want to thank them, and we want to thank you, because together, we really can make a difference. We absolutely can make a difference. So on the next slide, you'll see coming to terms with bias. You know, Bakari's favorite quote was, plan B is for people who don't have a plan A. What's your plan A? And if you would like to receive tips for building more loving relationship across differences, you can type your email in the chat again, or you can email info@bakarifoundation.org. If you would like to receive tips for building more loving relationship across differences, type your email in the chat or email the Bakari Foundation at info@bakarifoundation.org. We thank you so much. And again, we're dreaming, we're loving, we're leading because we believe there is no room for hate. On behalf of the Bakari Foundation, on behalf of our community, all of our sponsors, and those who have supported this through their time and their talents, and for those of you who care to get involved through mentoring or otherwise, we thank you. Because we're never gonna stop dreaming, we're never gonna stop loving, and we're never gonna stop leading. And today is the first day of creating a space for emerging leaders where there's no room for hate. Thank you. May you all be blessed. Goodbye.